As I begin the exit of my mid-20s, I'm reminded that, well, I'm getting older. It's a strange feeling, and in some ways this current era of video games where I'm constantly being bombarded by remakes of popular titles from my childhood and beyond sort of solidifies this notion. Hearing someone say that they haven't played the original 1997 masterpiece of Final Fantasy VII, but were really excited to try out the remake feels odd, because when I was growing up, such a statement was considered a cardinal sin. It's one of those games that, even though I didn't get to play it for the first time until about a decade after its release, still feels very nostalgic. If you'd like to see a video over my thoughts on the original game, I'll put a link in the description below, as well as at the end of this video. Now, at the time of writing, I completed Final Fantasy VII Remake a few weeks ago, and I've sat on it for quite a bit, trying to figure out whether or not I agree with how and where all the pieces have fallen. And after taking a peek at some general thoughts and initial critic reactions, mainly just the outrageous number of perfect scores, I feel a bit, well, uneasy, I guess is a pretty good word. I'll start off by saying that I actually really did enjoy my time with Remake. There are a handful of ideas and narrative details highlighted throughout its 30-ish hour runtime that completely outshine that of its predecessor. Though, considering the original game came out almost 25 years ago, that's to be expected. But is it perfect, or at least near to perfection? I personally don't think so. And I'm gonna refer you to the word personally that I wrote in big capital letters in my script. This is just my opinion. And truthfully, if you are a diehard fan of this game, know that I envy you so very much. In the end, I walked away with some mostly positive, though admittedly mixed feelings. So, let's break it down. I'll skip over some plot threads here and there and assume you already know the basics. Former soldier, Shinra, Mako, Avalanche. If you're watching this video, I'm assuming you're up to speed as well as privy to the knowledge that Remake only covers the Midgar arc of the original game.
Looks like we made it.
Now, in my video over Final Fantasy VII Remastered, I mentioned how I didn't feel as if the developers utilized the setting of Midgar enough in the last, 4/5 of the game? And while it remains ever present as a narrative device, the location is hardly revisited once our protagonists venture out into the world. So to hear that the first entry in this remake series would focus exclusively on Midgar was a genuinely exciting prospect. To be more specific, the majority of Remake takes place in the slums, and to their credit, the developers do an excellent job of making areas feel appropriately worn down and kinda crappy. Many locations feature a fairly linear design. On top of that, there are only 3 explorable towns, and one of them gets blown up 3/4 of the way through the game, so that sucks. Apart from that, there's not too much to explore aside from some of the back roads that tend to offer modest consumables.
Then, let's stick to the back streets?
Alright.
Now, the highlight here is undoubtedly Wall Market, which is a mix between Walmart and a strip club. Well, kinda. It's sort of like an underground Las Vegas. Take away your Playboy bunnies and put them in incredibly uncomfortable bee outfits, bet on some arena fights with giant robot houses, pay for incredibly inappropriate erotic massages. F it, put a gym in there for some reason. It fits. The other 2 areas, sectors 5 and 7, are essentially side quest hubs, but I'll talk about those a bit later on. A common point of praise that I've often seen thrown toward Remake is how alive each area feels. Townspeople can be heard commenting on current events as you progress through the story, and that seems to be a highlight for some. But aside from being outrageously loud to the point where I could barely hear whoever the hell I was supposed to be listening to,
I'll try not to.
Always happy to help stick it to Shinra.
Not good at all.
I don't know what it is.
I feel like this is a feature that's sort of commonplace in a lot of games I've played. Having NPCs talk to each other over looping animations didn't really impress me all that much, but it's still a nice touch to be sure. Other additions were much more welcome. I had said that Biggs, Wedge, and Jesse felt incredibly underutilized in the original game, each one having been killed off during the raid on Sector 7's tower. But the remake goes out of its way to make you genuinely care about each character's plight. Jesse in particular seems to have received the lion's share of this development, while also acting as a potential love interest for Cloud.
Welcome home, honey. Took your sweet time.
The fuck you say to me, you little shit?
And there's one mission in particular featuring her that just about had me sold on much of the expanded content, though we'll get to that in just a minute. Some new characters were also introduced, and they were pretty hit and miss. Though I can say that none of them were genuinely bad, save for 3 thugs trying their damnedest to rip off the hyenas from Lion King.
I'd say we're owed compensatory damages.
Composite. I don't get it. Oh, man!
So, there are Dementors in Final Fantasy VII now. That's a thing.
The Dementors, they were flying all over the place and they were scary, and then they'd come down and they'd suck the soul out of your body and it hurt!
Yeah, so throughout the game, just at random moments in the story, these things show up and attack your party. Just because. Sometimes they'll help you out. Other times, they don't, and they just kind of phase through you and move characters around sometimes.
What the hell was that?
Eat. You'll feel better.
Now, Remake does offer an explanation for these phantoms at the literal end of the game, like right before the final battle, but it's buried under a lot of dialogue that leans heavily toward the abstract and is just trying way too hard to sound more poetic than it actually is. That being said, a lot of online theories suggest an interesting departure from the original story going forward, but again, I'll touch on that a bit later. You see, a guy named William Shakespeare once said, "Brevity is the soul of wit." This just means don't waste my time. You keep it nice and simple. References to Red Letter Media aside, why are Cloud's acrobatic abilities so wildly inconsistent? Why does it feel like every few minutes this game has you moving through narrow corridors or ducking under heaps of fallen debris? I understand that a lot of these techniques are used to load upcoming areas, but Remake is constantly removing your ability to run or turning the game into a tightrope simulator, to the point where I actually started laughing out loud, and that is not a joke. Isn't Cloud like a super enhanced soldier?
Ex-soldier.
Right, sure, sorry. Isn't he like a super enhanced ex-soldier with crazy acrobatic skills? Oh, there's an opening up there that we can use to get inside this kiosk. Well, that's easy enough. Just have Cloud jump on up there, or we can take 20 minutes and give Tifa a shot at it. Cloud Strife. This guy. Can't get up here.
Well, you got me. By all accounts, it doesn't make sense.
Okay, so on a completely different note, when it comes to expanding on the original's lore and sense of place, Remake occasionally offers a poignant look into the lives of those affected by the actions of both Shinra and Avalanche. A mission featuring Jesse, Biggs, and Wedge perfectly encapsulates everything I was hoping Remake would represent when compared to its predecessor.
Guess I'll get right to the point then.
So, towards the end of the night, Jesse asks Cloud for a special favor, offering up a materia in exchange for safe passage to the Sector 7 plate. It's probably the first mission that took me by genuine surprise. I was like, oh, okay. I'm actually not sure where this is going. And while I won't bore you with the details, this mission gives us a deeper look at life on the plates, as well as insight into Jessie's life, her fears, her struggles, which Cloud goes on to validate despite often touting a fairly cold personality.
Jesse's dad was in there, right?
Yeah.
Mako poisoning. Happened while Jesse was doing a show with the Gold Saucer. What do you care?
No. I want to hear it.
When a remake offers meaningful and legitimate character growth where there originally was none, the time it spends on these moments feels warranted, it feels deserved. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. As previously stated, Remake takes on a very linear approach when it comes to its mission structure, oftentimes confirming whether or not you're ready to move on with the main storyline. In between these moments, you're highly encouraged to take on odd jobs, not only to make money, but earn in-store discounts and special rewards. The problem is, as we alluded to earlier, a vast majority of these missions feel like unabashed filler. Kill these rats. No, not those rats. Go back, kill these rats. Find several missing children. Rescue my stupid cats.
Screw this.
Okay, general rule. If your character mentions that something is annoying or not worth his time, it's probably just as frustrating for the player. The word we tend to associate with this kind of stuff is padding, and I think that a lot of that comes down to how few options the player is given when it comes to interacting with the game itself. Think about it this way. In a game like The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, and I know this is like comparing Master Swords to Buster Swords here, but stick with me. The player is given a lot of different mechanics to utilize outside of talking to townsfolk and engaging in combat. There's climbing, gliding, cooking, alchemy. Hell, even your clothing works its way into specific mission subsets. This allows for the developer to really drive the experience through various means. It keeps the adventure fresh and exciting. But when I look at Remake, I can interact with certain things by pressing a button, or I can initiate combat. At times, the game will let me choose one of several dialogue options, but that's fairly rare. And that's about it. These mechanics alone don't exactly carry a hefty amount of side quest potential, because if you're like me, when it comes to optional content, I feel naturally compelled to see what all the game has to offer. Now, if there are like 300 missions in between each area, I'd be like, yeah, f*** that, I'm going to bed. But Remake only has a handful in between just a few chapters.
Thanks for helping him out. Just so happens there's another job I'd like to offer you.
It's all very doable, just not entirely compelling. To be fair, there are a few minigames here and there that I got straight up addicted to that offered up tangible rewards, and one quest giver thoughtfully blends combat mechanics and materia manifestation to great effect, having you actually fight against your summons in order to utilize them in combat later. Also, I wrote down in my notes that trying to sneak out of Aerith's house was, and I quote, annoying as fuck. Because the game tasks you with avoiding objects on the floor so as not to make a sound, but puts a goddamn bucket right in front of you that you cannot see at the outset because Cloud is straight up blocking the camera.
What are you doing?
My favorite part is that if you fail at it enough, the game's just like, f*** it, turns into the smart house and cleans everything off the floor for your final attempt. I feel like that scene in particular was aimed exclusively at those who have played the original, because it feels so out of place in the remake. In fact, I feel like a lot of stuff on offer here caters toward those familiar with the previous game. Kate Sith shows up just out of nowhere for one scene. Just one. If I hadn't played the original and saw that, I'd be doing a quadruple take before demanding a solid refund on my mushroom stash. Next! Unsurprisingly, combat turns out to be Remake's strongest facet, as Square Enix continues to refine its real-time skirmishes into a sort of pseudo-turn-based hybrid, with the addition of a menu that slows down time for spellcasting and selecting abilities. Switching characters pushes you to adapt to different playstyles, but towards the end of the game, I would sort of use it as a cheap way to draw the attention of whatever I was fighting. You see, whenever you swap to a new character on the fly, enemies tend to shift their attacks over to you, so I usually just switch to Barret or Aerith, my two long-range fighters, and had them heal Tifa and Cloud before I got attacked again. Then I'd switch back to my close-range fighters and just kind of repeat that process. Now, a common complaint I've been hearing is how worthless your AI companions can be, and how something like Final Fantasy XII's Gambit system could be incorporated to make them less, well, stupid. I sort of agree, but I think if such a system were in place, I wouldn't really feel a need to switch characters that much at all. It would feel like a sort of pointless feature. Why switch off when every character is keyed up to pull off everything I programmed them to? To me, you lose a bit of that personal touch. You're no longer required to adapt your playstyle. I definitely see where that criticism stems from, but it rarely bothered me. What's most impressive is Remake's take on weapon progression. Leveling up each one individually instead of having them share upgrade resources is a brilliant move. What's more, certain abilities that are unique to each armament can be transferred over to other weapons should certain requirements be filled. Tack on the fact that certain chunks of materia can take on added effects as you bring them into battle more often, and yeah, it's damn near perfect. Other than that, your characters do level up, but I hardly noticed. Playing on normal difficulty, the game's just like, okay, you leveled up.
Okay.
I did spot a few other chinks in the armor. One battle had me fighting a group of enemies who consistently used a sleep spell on me that kept my team inoperable for the majority of the fight. And once one person was down, I was kinda screwed. So that pissed me off. Otherwise though, there weren't too many sore spots. The boss battles in particular were pretty fantastic and highlighted a lot of what makes the combat system so much fun in the first place. Despite that massive tonal shift during the last fight, I can honestly say that I still enjoyed the hell out of it. Oh, and a quick side note, the final battle with Sephiroth here at the end, it's got nearly the exact same setup as the original. So, I absolutely love the look of this game. As far as presentation goes, Squeenix nailed it. Yeah, there's a bit of texture pop in here and there, but it never took me out of the experience. Plus, the majority of it probably gets loaded in while you're prepping for future back problems.
How much longer?
Not so far. A few more days.
And yeah, I know I already mentioned Wall Market, but holy crap, the atmosphere here is on point. Special mention to that dance scene, which, you know what? I'm gonna come out and say it. This is the best part of the game. Right here. Best scene.
I don't dance. I know you can. Not a chance, no.
Aside from the main cast, the rest of the characters don't receive as much attention. Which is fine, makes sense, less screen time, but their lip syncing can be distractingly bad.
Oh, hello there. It is a pleasure to meet you both. I'm a journalist for the Daily Buzz.
And that's not to mention the script that includes a lot of really awkward grunts and over-exaggerated expressions.
That and your overtrained ego are the main reasons you lost to our bold challenger here.
It all feels very, well, anime.
What is all this?
Which, again, makes sense. It's from Japan, but the thing is, when it comes to anime, a lot of those shows can take full advantage of 2D animation to compensate for those awkward moments. Done right, they can complement the speed and tempo of that animation style. Here, where the visuals are erring on the side of realistic, to some degree, those gestures just reminded me of poor motion capture. On the positive end, a fair amount of the dialogue is surprisingly good. And the soundtrack, it's just perfect. I don't think there is a single song in the bunch that let me down or didn't highlight a particular moment in exactly the way it was designed to. Even some of the newer tracks stand out. For example, I liked how the Flying High theme mimics a lot of the instrumentation from the Top Gun anthem. Seriously, just going back and listening to the soundtrack of this game kind of changes my perception of the entire product. Like, I'm able to overlook a lot of the flaws and just focus on the feeling, the experience of it all. Stay strong. Almost done. I wanted to address a few comments aimed at the ending of Remake, which, should you dive a bit deeper into online forums, shows that this may not even be much of a remake at all, but like Final Fantasy VII 2. The basic idea is that the Dementors are keeping everything in check from a narrative perspective, guiding each character down the path of the original game with slight variation. In this game, Barret is stabbed by Sephiroth atop the Shinra building. Yeah, that doesn't happen in the original. So these things use their crazy Dementor healing powers to prevent a potential Aerith incident.
So,
as you approach the portal of destiny, or whatever, Aerith says that on the other side is freedom. Pure, unadulterated freedom. You just have to beat a giant Heartless. Do that, and shit, anything could happen from here on out. My absolute favorite part of this fight is that every so often the party gets shot with memory bullets that show visions from the original game. When Barret asks what they are, Red 13 replies,
A glimpse of tomorrow if we fail here today.
Chills. All over my body. Literally fighting against the fate of the original game was so goddamn interesting to me because, okay, look, I love the original story. It's undeniably one of my all-time favorites. But I know it already. I already know what's going to happen, more or less. Aerith dies, Sephiroth summons Meteor, and Elsa travels. It's been told 1,000 times. But now, I'm not too sure. See, I don't exactly know how it's all going to end, and I personally find that kind of exciting.
I've been dying to see you.
You see right there, that line's not as awkward anymore. But then, in late April, a quote from producer Yoshinori Kitase, "We're not drastically changing the story and making it into something completely different than the original. Even though it's a remake, please assume the story of Final Fantasy VII will continue as Final Fantasy VII always has." Okay, so, wait, hold on a sec. Why is fighting against fate a major theme in this game if the fate is gonna... Wait a minute.
Almost there, Cloud. We're almost there.
When I was playing through Remake, I felt sort of split down the middle. In all seriousness, there are a few scenes here that had me reaching for a box of tissues. Scenes that they absolutely nailed.
They took everything from us. Again.
Like that. That's perfect. But then, there are moments that completely took me out of the experience. Odd pacing, poor quest design, all of it felt like roadblocks in the way of something greater. That being said, I haven't been this excited for a sequel in quite some time. And who knows, maybe we'll get a Crisis Core remake in the near future. A man can dream. Thanks so much for watching. Here's the video over the original Final Fantasy VII, as well as one other one for good measure. See you guys in the next video.
Dun, 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 dun.